It is a legend no one will forget. Everyone thought King Koopa had left the Mushroom Kingdom, and then his doom ship attacked. King Koopa was back with the greatest danger ever known, his Koopa kids. Using their new superpowers, the Super Mario Brothers rescued Princess Toadstool and beat back the evil Koopa family. I'll get those flutters!
Super Mario Bros. 3 is often considered to be the finest game released for the original Nintendo Entertainment System, at least in terms of its platformers, and really, it's very hard to argue with that because the game is damn near incredible in both its scope and the way that it improves upon the original Mario formula. Going by that same vein, you could argue that, objectively speaking, the cartoon based off of the game is the best of the 3 DiC animated Mario cartoons. And it's easy to see why here. Its storylines, its writing, its focus, and its character and art designs are actually much more well done than its predecessor. And bear in mind, I'm saying this as a fan of the original Super Mario Bros. Super Show. I just happen to like this cartoon a lot better is all. Now, it should be noted that this cartoon is nowhere near the length of its predecessor. I mean, the Super Show lasted for 65 episodes, each one about a half hour in length if we're counting the live-action segments. But this one only lasted for 26 episodes, each episode about 15 minutes in length, because it was originally part of an hour-long block with Captain N the Game Master, and it was never really meant to be shown as its own entity until much later on. But of course, as anybody will tell you, length is not a determining factor in quality. Insert your own male genitalia joke here, and let's move on. The overarching plot of the show is of course nicely summarized in the opening to every episode. King Koopa was originally defeated by Mario and Luigi and banished from the Mushroom Kingdom, but now he's back and not only touts a brand new army and arsenal, but is also assisted by his 7 children. And of course the internet has been debating about where these kids came from since they were introduced, so I'm not even going to go near the subject. The point is, he's back and he's badass. Speaking of the Koopalings, this is also one of the points of contentions for fans of the game, in that all of the Koopalings are given different names in the series than they had in the games. Wendy is referred to as Cootie Pie, Morton is called Big Mouth, and so on and so forth. It's kind of silly really, but there is actually an interesting reason for why they're referred to by different names. Legend has it, and of course by legend I mean the Mario wikis around the internet, that the cartoon was put into production well before the American localization of Super Mario Bros. 3, meaning that the production team behind the cartoon only had a Japanese version of the game to work off of. Well, that's fine, you say. Why didn't they just get somebody who could translate the names and tell them what they were missing? Well, here's the funny thing. They did have somebody on hand who could translate Japanese for them. The problem was there were no names to translate. See, in the Japanese version of these Mario games, specifically Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World, the Koopalings don't have their own unique names. They're just referred to collectively as Koopalings, meaning that since there were no names to translate, the production team had to come up with names on the fly because there was no localization at that time that they could check up on. All things considered, that's really not something that you should complain about. I mean, name changes happen all the time when they're translating something from one medium to animation. And I'm actually pretty impressed that they gave each of the Koopalings a specific personality and a name that actually matches it. So when you see a character named Cheatsy in this series, you know exactly what to expect from him. Now, I mentioned before that this series has a much better focus than its predecessor, and what I meant by that was it actually has an established setting where all the plots take place, the Mushroom Kingdom. They may go to different regions of the Mushroom Kingdom, such as Desert Land, Iceland, and Grassland, but for the most part, all of the plots are taking place in the Mushroom Kingdom itself, which gives the series a much-needed established continuity and a sense of familiarity to the game that it's based off of.
Good choice.
This is the true story.
C'est une histoire vraie.
Seven strangers.
No, not that one! Ugh. What I mean is, in this continuity, there are apparently dozens of warp pipes in the Mushroom Kingdom that could take you anywhere in the world, or take you from the real world to the Mushroom Kingdom. And apparently they are in no short supply because the show ends up taking us to places like Paris, Venice, the whole of Africa, Washington DC, amongst other places. And as cheesy and as stupid as the idea of a fictional universe being connected to the real world can be, believe it or not, a lot of the episodes taking place in the real world were some of the more memorable ones from this series. In fact, one of my favorite episodes of the series takes place almost explicitly on the real world, with only a few cutbacks to what's happening in the Mushroom Kingdom, and that is the episode 7 Continents for 7 Koopa Kids, where Koopa basically sends each of his children to one of the 7 continents and has them completely take it over, causing mischief and chaos. The payoff of the episode isn't really that good, but it does have some of the funnier moments in the series, and it was just such a really epic idea. I actually would have loved to see this split into a 2 or even a 3-part episode, because there are a lot of really good ideas here that they could have played with. Now, that's not to say that the episodes taking place specifically in the Mushroom Kingdom were bad. In fact, far from it. In fact, I was introduced to the show through one of the early episodes, Mind Your Mummy Mommy Mario. Whew, try saying that 5 times fast. And while it's definitely not one of the best episodes in the series lineup, it is a pretty good indication about how well it sticks to the Mario formula. And really, it is a good introductory episode if you're trying to get somebody into the series. Oh, and then there's that episode. Yes, anybody who has seen the entirety of this series knew that I was going to talk about this one, because that episode, it's just fascinating. That episode, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is Cutie Pie Rocks, guest starring Milli Vanilli. Now, when I say guest starring, I do in fact mean guest starring. This is Fob Morvan and Rob Pilatus, the 2 members of Milli Vanilli, playing themselves in a Mario Brothers cartoon. And this is by far the most infamous episode of the entire series, bar none. Now, you might be wondering why this episode is so infamous. And for us to get into that, we do need to go into a bit of a history about Milli Vanilli, so please bear with me while I give you the truncated version of the facts that you should know about their career. Milli Vanilli was a very successful pop act in the 1980s that reached international acclaim with their album Girl You Know It's True. However, there was a scandal involving them lip-syncing during their 1990 Grammy performance, which led to them becoming musical pariahs pretty much overnight when it was revealed that they didn't actually do any singing. Instead, the backup band recording everything, including their vocals, and then shipped that out. These 2 were basically just figureheads. Of course, if you ask me, it's pretty much karma for how they had the audacity to say that they were, quote, the next Elvis, and were also bigger than Bob Dylan, Mick Jagger, and Sir Paul McCartney, and had more musical talent than them as well. No, I'm not making that up. That was an actual quote by the band. So how is that relevant to an episode featuring them? Well, this episode aired less than a month before the scandal broke out. So let's look at this from the perspective of somebody who owns a successful animation studio. You've just had a very successful cartoon, and you had guest starring on it a very successful pop act who, not a month later, are revealed to be complete phonies, and are pretty much a joke everywhere in the world now. So what are you going to do? You don't want to remind people about that because it could be bad for the show's reputation. So there's only one logical thing to do. Completely wipe the master tape for that episode and never let it air on television again. Yes, this episode of the series was never seen on television again due to the Milli Vanilli scandal, and it was also never included on any of the VHS tape releases for the show either, because they were afraid that there would be backlash due to the scandal. Now, of course, the episode was released on DVD with the rest of the series, but it was in a very heavily edited state. Now, it was common for many of the licensed songs that were used throughout the series to be removed for syndication, since they no longer held the license for the songs, but in this particular episode, not only did the songs get removed, but they also removed several lines of dialogue that name-dropped songs from Milli Vanilli, or even ones that made mention of lyrics from Milli Vanilli. And in probably one of the most infamous parts of this episode, a good chunk of the ending was actually cut because it takes place during a song played by Milli Vanilli at a Milli Vanilli concert while Princess Peach looks on in a trance-like state.